Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Here's another author, and he's an author whom you probably have heard if you've been listening to our radio shows. You saw Boomer Times because he was a book of the month in February, and the book that we featured was Justified Retribution. His name is Jorge Reyes S. He wrote another book called Road to Redemption, which I believe you said was your first one.
No, this is the sequel to the first book.
This is the sequel to the first one. Okay.
Right.
So, Jorge, you certainly are enjoying yourself. I mean, I love this because this has not been your profession. That's what's so much fun, isn't it?
That is absolutely correct, right. I was actually in international finance for probably about almost 40 years.
And so all of a sudden now, this is a whole new way that you think, because you don't have to think financially. Although,
right.
To write a book like this, I'm sure you use a lot of your organizational skills because,
I tried,
yes.
And, of course, I use some of the background from my experience traveling to various countries in Latin America. So I use that as part of what I relate to as in the book.
So when you were working in a corporate environment, did you want to murder anybody?
More than once. Yes, indeed. At least hypothetically speaking. But no, actually, it's interesting you say that because in speaking with someone recently and they were reading my book, he says, where is that persona that you have? I mean, I always known you as a gentle, very mild manner and so forth. And says, well, I guess everyone has their other personalities. So I guess that I expressed that one in my books.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but also we see movies, we see all sorts of things, and
right.
and we can let our imagination go. But the nice thing is not only your imagination, but your writing skills certainly came forward. Since we discussed the Justified Retribution, maybe we could discuss Road to Redemption a little bit.
Of course,
I don't think
I'll be delighted.
That we did too much with that.
Right.
So why don't you go through that a little bit?
Well, the second book begins basically at the end of the first, although they can be read as separate books because I relate some of the events without trying to repeat verbatim what happened in the first book. But in the second book, you have these people who are leaving Colombia. Well, actually, at that point in time, they're leaving Medellin and they're going to their homestead. This gentleman has a huge ranch in the mountains. His wife has lost her memory. So although he rescued her, she doesn't remember who he is, except that she knows that he's handsome and he was very gentle. And there are these new people that she has with her. There's new friends that actually help her escape in a way because they actually went out and told him what they thought that, that there was this woman who didn't know who she was and that she was captured. She was there as I guess you could call it a hostage, except that he has never heard of any ransom demands. And so, of course, he doesn't believe it at first. But because one of the people involved warned him that there was going to be an attempt on his life, and it did occur, and that's obviously only in the first book. He had some relationship with them. So when they came up with this, he wasn't sure whether they were trying to, ambush him or something. And finally, he sees a picture of her in camera. Of course, cell phones with cameras weren't that easily available back in 2008 and 2009, but digital cameras were, and they were small, and you could take pictures. So they actually show him a picture of hers. And
he couldn't believe it. I'm
he
sure
couldn't believe it, and he's like, of course, she has seen a picture of him and of his child with the same camera, because the young man who went to warn him had taken a couple of pictures, because they were going to use those pictures to identify him and kill him. So when she sees the pictures, she recognizes her son, a little boy, but the man in the picture, she does not.
But she does recognize her son.
Yes, she
Isn't
does
that
recognize her
interesting, though?
son. Right. Some of the memories are coming back, but not everything. So she was elated, and she was delighted, and of course she eventually gets out. They find each other. Now they're leaving. And once they're there, they decide that they're going to fly to Mexico to see her parents, because they were very concerned when they were told that apparently she had drowned. And they go there, and then they decide to go to Copper Canyon, which apparently, and I have been to both, the Grand Canyon and Copper Canyon in Mexico. And it's supposed to be, presumably it's bigger and as breathtaking as the Grand Canyon is. So they're going to take a train ride, which goes basically from Chihuahua, Mexico, to all the way to the west coast of Mexico. Mm-hmm. It's a long journey, overnight and all that. But on the way there, they stopped. They get off to see some of the towns and villages, and they're going to do some scouting on their own, kind of excursion like. And they go out, and they find they're kind of in a remote area. There's no one there, but their son, who seems to have kind of a sixth sense, sees these birds, of prey flying kind of in a circle in an area. Says, well, it must be dead animals. Says, well, why don't we go see? And when they get closer and closer, actually what they find is a child, and it's lying on this dirt trail. They're actually driving in a jeep, and they realize that this little girl is really dehydrated, has probably not eaten. But when they open her up, the dress or the garment that she has with her, they find it's a baby. And of course, they take both of them and go back into town. They go see the police and call the police and all that. What it is that she's a survivor of a horrible attack by the cartel leader, who is involved with the man who has just died in Colombia, who was the kingpin of the drug cartel. Well, this guy is the cartel leader in Mexico, and he decided to burn to the ground this Indian village with all the people inside a church. They ran into the church for protection. Well, they burned the place down with the people inside. She somehow manages to survive. Mm-hmm. She was actually under a huge piece of stone under the altar, and that's how she survives. And they don't see her, of course, and they leave, and she walks around as she knows there's no one around, and eventually she leaves the little village because there's no more food left. Then, of course, this happens. In the meantime, the police hear her story, and they find out they go there to check it out, and well, they ask Alejandro, who is the hero in the first book, if he can help. He says, well, I know more or less where I found her, so they decide to go out there, and indeed they find this village, just, dogs running around, wild dogs by now, and so the news get out somehow, as usual, and the TV reporters and radio, and at least it starts with the press at first, just a small announcement that they had found this village and they have found this little girl and so forth and so on. So the cartel leader, because this is in Mexico, it's a Mexican newspaper, he reads it, he gets very angry with his lieutenants that they didn't finish the job completely. And now there is this DEA agent who is also working in tandem with a Mexican police detective, and they work together trying to stop drug trafficking. As a matter of fact, one of them had been at a bar looking like a homeless or out of luck kind of a person. And he looks like an old, toothless old man because he's made up himself to look like that. And these guys are all celebrating. And he realized, and he hears these things, and they tie the two things together, and they realize that this is the same people, and this is the gang who belongs to this cartel. So now they're trying to see what they can do. Well,
excuse me, I have to tell you something. When President Trump was talking to the president of Colombia, I was thinking about you at the time that happened, because now Colombia really seems like it has gotten cleaner.
Yes, much
than it
better.
had when you were writing your story, I'm sure.
Right. Well, that was back then. Of course, it wasn't this president, was Uribe who was the president, who was actually ran for re-election, and he won the second term. And then, of course, he couldn't run for the third term, and this gentleman took over. So, and then they were both from the same party, but then they drifted apart, and they're right now against each other because Uribe doesn't agree with the way this peace initiative that they did with the FARC, which is mentioned in the first book, of course, because it's part of the story. And so they're now
continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was thinking about Colombia when you've been talking about. So now it's gotten into a bigger deal, and now it's the same group that was in the first book.
Right.
Now they've
And in the meantime,
wait, one more thing. Why did he want that town destroyed?
He wanted to make an example of those who didn't work with him to transport the drugs, because Indians who live in those caves and canyons and all of that, they are aware they have all these hidden trails that obviously the police and the army doesn't know about, and they want to use them as mules to transport the drugs to the United States. So this is part of what's going on. And of course, in the meantime, the widow of the Victor Draco, who is the main antagonist in the first book, she now has decided to take over his drug enterprise. And she has now also become associated with the cartel leader and also with the fellow in Miami who is the money launderer. So now against the triumvirate, the Troika is back in place, even though one of the original is dead. And of course, she was glad that he had died, because she hated him. It was apparently very rough and very nasty to her, and he had basically bought her when she was a 15-year-old girl. She was a virgin, and but he offered money to her parents, who had
glad to other children, who was glad to get the money. Huh?
Right, 9 children.
Oh, okay.
So he rapes her. He has her have plastic surgery. He enhances her breasts, and the doctors didn't want to do it. and her buttocks, and they didn't want to do it because she was still growing. She's only a 15-year-old, and this guy insisted. So she's really gone through a lot of suffering, but she is a mean woman too. But now that sort of gives you an idea why she may be,
of course,
so nasty.
Sure.
And she has no scruples either. She kills people right and left without any feelings of sorrow or remorse. Exactly.
Do you know people like this?
Only in the movies. Only in the movies. Although I have met some sick guys in business, but I don't think they're that bad.
Right. Okay.
So anyway, as the story goes, our hero, he actually saves one of the two men who are looking for clues as to where these guys, who were the guys that did this deed. The American agent actually dies. They're ambushed and they're killed. The Mexican fellow, he barely survives, and he survives because Alejandro interceded and helped him survive. So now the news become big news because there was this attack on this clinic in the mountains in this village, which exists. It's a real village.
And I think that you're listening to Jorge Reyes S, but I want to tell you, you're listening to a book called Road to Redemption. And it's the second book after the first book he wrote, which was called Justified Retribution. So we're just listening to the way an author would describe this. Go ahead.
Right. So now this thing is all over the news, and of course Alejandro and his family, they don't want to be items in the news, but they have been. Incidentally, they also, in the meantime, while all of this is going on, they send a policeman to get her and her son, which are staying in a chalet in a rustic, I would call it little house.
But is it a hideaway? I mean,
no. This is in the village. This is people would stay overnight to rest and then get going the next day. It's a cabin. Mm-hmm. Okay, very commodious, but it is a cabin. So the police knocks on the door and they tries to takes him with her, and the guys who are been following the policeman, who is involved with the cartel, well, they stop him so that they can take the woman and the child.
Imposes someone else.
And no, he's aware of who they are, except that they kill him anyway.
So where's the husband?
Well, the husband happens to be in the hospital.
Oh my God!
Visiting, and of course they kidnap them and they take him away. The husband eventually finds out. He gets back to the cabin. They're not there, and she wrote him a little note before she left about that they were going to meet him there, so forth and so on. So he runs back to the hospital. They're not there either. There is one of the American agent, his boss, has actually flown to Chihuahua, and he thinks that Alejandro is actually involved in the drug business because he's from Colombia, and he thinks that maybe he has done this thing as a subterfuge, rather than, he doesn't believe him, period. And the story goes on. Now there's a pursuit as to he can't figure out where they are, except that Gabby happens to have a black what do you call it? It used to be the cell phones before real cell phone. Well, anyway, it's another cellular. The name will come back to me in a minute. He happens to have it in his pocket and he's on. And so he hears part of the conversation of his wife and the child being spoken to by these
Kidnappers. Yeah.
So at some point in time, they stop in the middle of the road, on a gas station, restaurant kind of area, resting stop, right? And well, she wants to go to the bathroom. They take her with them. The guy checks the bathroom before and after, make sure that she didn't leave any notes, except he didn't count that she had lipstick and she wrote on a piece of toilet paper that she had been kidnapped, and by the kind of car that she's in, blah blah blah, and she rolls it back into the toilet paper and puts it there, and of course the goon doesn't see that. The child, in the meantime, also goes to the bathroom. While he's there, well, the gangster doesn't really care about the child because it's only a child, so he lets him go in, and he actually manages to call his father and tells them, where they are.
Smart kid.
Yes, he is. Where they are and what kind of a car they're being driven in. So at least he now knows and where they are. And he decides to go after them. And eventually, somehow, he manages to rescue them, although they end up in this warehouse near the city of Chihuahua, where they have drugs. There's a factory. They're putting their assembly operation where they get the powder and they put it in bags to take to the United States.
Right.
And so there is this very dramatic happening where
lots of guns and lots of big bad things, huh?
Right. So, but he does manage to rescue them, and eventually they get out, and that gave me the opening for the third book.
Oh my goodness! So it's really a trilogy, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So now you're working on the third book, and then when you get it finished, what are you going to do? I mean, that family has left now, and it's not in your mind anymore.
Of course. Well, no, I have other ideas in mind. There's one particular storyline that I want to follow about. This one would be general audience, because both of these books, they have a lot of killing and cursing and dirty words, both in Spanish and English. So I wouldn't say that it's appropriate for children. I think this new book would really be for general audiences, perhaps even more for children of a certain age. Although I think we're all children at some point in time,
that's
even
funny.
though we may be older.
But so this isn't a mystery, really. It's I guess
it's a tale. It's a story.
I guess it is in a way.
What the reader will find or pursue in reading the book is how the events channel and how things happen. Of course, you don't know how the hero is going to survive. You don't know whether his wife or child is going to survive. I mean, you have to go through all this process. And, of course, being good people, we all hope that they will.
Right. Are cartels still very
I believe
strong
they
there
are. I
in
believe
Mexico?
they are.
Is
yes.
that mostly?
Yes.
Not in Colombia anymore?
Well, in Colombia, there still are, even though with the FARC peace treaty, it has diminished somewhat. But there's a lot of drugs going to the United States. If it's not coming from Colombia, it's coming from Peru. I mean, Colombia is a big country, has lots of mountains. And, so I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people are still, cultivating cocaine.
I'm sure.
and then rather than shipping more direct, they're probably going through other. Colombia has borders with Venezuela.
I was just going to ask you now about Venezuela.
Yes.
So now they're in such bad condition, I would think that they're easy prey for anybody.
Well, more than anything else, I think what's going on in Venezuela, it's basically a default or broken state. It's really terrible. People are really struggling and suffering. There's an incredible amount of corruption. Just to give you an idea, the average salary, for example, for let's say a retired person, I think is equivalent of about $15 a month, based on black market rate.
And Jorge, I have to tell you that I've had so many wonderful friends who were very wealthy in Venezuela. Of course, they kept taking their money out.
Yes.
And maybe, that sometimes leads to things that happen too. But Venezuela was like the star. I mean, I've been to so many of their little cities. So it's interesting how your books, even though they're fiction, they're so true in so many ways. And so we look forward to having you getting into your last book when you get that finished.
Absolutely. We'll be delighted to come back.
Right. And we wish you so much good luck.
Well, thank you very much. And if I may ask you, the last time I was with you, you were looking into publishing your...
a dog, a thing on pet rescues?
No, I think it was your...
Oh, my husband's book. Oh, yes. Right. Well, I haven't gotten finished with making all the corrections yet. Okay. That's something that I'm going to be doing. Right. Yes, the moon, right. Saving the moon. That's it. Well, thank you. Well, we have a lot to talk about in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure, Jorge.